It happened to many people. Every time you close the door, you start hearing voices outside. And they kept on getting louder and louder. It seemed like there was a bunch of people. And then all of a sudden, you'd open the door and be no one there. It would be quiet.
Welcome to Tell Me a Ghost Story, the late night call-in podcast where we delve into the world of the supernatural and explore the eerie and unexplained. I'm your host, Michelle Newman. This podcast features true stories from our callers that will send shivers down your spine and leave you questioning the existence of the afterlife. So grab a cozy blanket, turn down the lights.
Hey, Michelle, this is James from San Francisco. I was the gentleman that talked to you about the Post Street ghosts. I worked at UCSF Medical Center on Parnassus in San Francisco for about 10 years, and it was really haunted. Had all sorts of experiences there. For one thing, there was a bathroom in the kitchen, which turns out, by the way, that the kitchen where I worked, I was actually in the office with food service, but the kitchen used to be a morgue back before they remodeled the building, like in the 40s or 50s. So there was a lot of activity in the kitchen. I used to go to this bathroom in the morning that was private by myself, and it happened to many people. Every time you close the door, you start hearing voices outside. And they kept on getting louder and louder. It seemed like there was a bunch of people. And then all of a sudden, you'd open the door and be no one there. It would be quiet. A couple of things that happened a lot was coming from the basement, where I had to get things out of storage up these stairs, and I always feel like little hands pulling the back of my shirt. It turns out there was an exorcism there. I don't know when this was, and some people attribute it to urban legend, but I guess the 8th floor of the children's wing was so haunted that they had an exorcist there. I think it was in the early 80s or the late 70s. I'll have to find out the date of that. But the place was really haunted. Finally, one thing that happened to me, and there's so much that did, I guess I could tell you more, but I just wanted to get back to you, is that I was in the restroom one time washing my hands after going to the bathroom, relieving myself, and all of a sudden I looked to my right in the urinal. It looks like the kind of smoke that comes up from a volcano. It came up out of the urinal and started rising and bubbling and turning in on itself. And I'm fumbling to get my camera. No one's going to believe me, of course. And as soon as I do, the clouds get sucked back into it. But that was it. There's a whole bunch more stuff I'll try to remember and get back to you on. And I have other stories too, but that is me, James, from Post Street, San Francisco, the Post Street ghost guy. And thank you so much. I'm really enjoying the calls. I'm going to try to get more people that I know to call you as well. All right. Ta-ta. Bye-bye.
Thank you, James, the Post Street ghost guy from San Francisco. There are so many layers of hauntings from an old medical center. I love hearing about them, not only because they are usually scary and weird, but also because they're so credible. So thank you for calling in again. I look forward to hearing more of your stories.
Hello, Michelle. This is Melissa. I'm formerly from Pittsburgh, and I have a ghost story to tell. So, my story starts in my 20s. Whenever I was in grad school, and I had an internship at a place called Greystone House. Now, Greystone House was a big, sprawling house. As the name suggests, it was built out of stone, which is pretty rare in Pittsburgh. And it had been built in the 1700s as a stagecoach inn and a brothel. But when I worked there, of course, it was not a brothel anymore. It was a group home for teenage boys who had been removed from their parents' care due to drug issues. The most common ghost story I heard there from my coworkers was that the faucet, like when you walk past the faucet, it would go off on its own, and this was like any faucet anywhere in this huge house. You know, bathroom faucet, shower faucet. I remember one in particular, my friend Mike walked past the bathroom with the door hanging open. Nothing was amiss, but just a minute later, he had to walk past the same bathroom again, and the shower and the sink were both running full blast, and nobody had been in that bathroom. The story that I had that happen to me personally happened several times, which it definitely happened over a period of weeks, which was interesting. At 6 o'clock every single day, we would go into the dining room. I would go into the dining room with the boys, and we would sit down and eat. And the doorbells would go off, and the doorbells are pretty loud, rowdy home full of boys. But we would check the front door at 6 o'clock p.m. every single day. It would go off. Nobody's there. So then we would go check the back door. Nobody would be there. And then we would go check the side doors, because there's quite a few doors here. It's a big place. Nothing. We never saw anybody leaving. We never saw any kids running away, playing ding dong ditch or anything like that. And it was the same time every single day. And it would happen several times, so that we'd have to keep checking all the different doors. I never saw any physical body, or I never saw any apparitions of people who lived there. I don't know if they were former ladies of the night or who the ghost might have been, but it will definitely stick in my mind for a while.
Thank you, Melissa from Pittsburgh.
Hey, Michelle, I don't know if you ever heard of this, but I thought I'd call in and ask. I have a group of guy friends who all live in this 5-bedroom house. Each dude rents a room. There's a room by the main entryway door that they can't keep filled. And they tend to zip 4 people from that room, because everyone who ends up renting that room ends up going to drug rehab. Everyone ends up going to rehab, or they end up developing serious drug issues. And I get that, obviously it depends on who you're renting to, but that room just seems cursed, and the entity's terrible. It seems like it's paranormal. So let me know what you think. Thanks.
Thank you for that call. I need to sit with that for a second, because that's not really a ghost story, is it? Not in the traditional sense. There's no woman in white, no cold spots, no things that go bump in the night. 4 different people, same room, same outcome. Before you say it, yes, I know. Correlation isn't causation. Maybe they're renting to people who are already struggling. Maybe the landlord isn't screening tenants carefully. Maybe. But 4 times in a year raises interesting questions. I want to read something from a book that's been living on my nightstand for a couple months now. It's called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Dr. Gabor Mate. He's a physician who worked in Vancouver's downtown east side with people struggling with severe addiction. And he talks about this concept from the Buddhist tradition, the hungry ghost. And here's the quote. Hungry ghosts are these beings with enormous bellies and tiny, narrow throats. They're forever starving, forever trying to consume something to fill the emptiness inside them, but nothing ever satisfies. Nothing ever fits through that throat. They're trapped in the cycle of craving and emptiness, craving and emptiness. End quote. Mate uses this as a metaphor for addiction, that insatiable hunger, that hole that can't be filled no matter how much you pour into it. Now, I'm not saying that room is haunted, literally, by a Buddhist hungry ghost, but stay with me here. What if some places hold hunger? What if trauma or desperation or the specific flavor of human suffering can soak into the walls the same way cigarette smoke does? 4 different people walk into that room. 4 people spiral into addiction or relapse so badly they need to go to rehab. The caller even said the energy in the room feels terrible. They could feel it. In Mate's book, he talks about how addiction isn't really about substance. It's about the pain you're trying to escape. It's about the emptiness you're trying to fill. And if that room has somehow absorbed years, maybe decades, of that kind of suffering, what does it do to someone who's already vulnerable? Someone who's already got their own hollow place inside? Maybe they walk in there and something recognizes them. Something says, "Oh, I know this feeling. I know this hunger."
This is Chuck from upstate New York. I've been listening, and I just gotta tell somebody about what happened. There's this empty lot on the end of my street. It's been sitting there my whole life. Some house burned down in the 70s or whatever, and now it's just weaved and busted up concrete. Nobody knows what to do with it. Nobody's done anything with it. It just sits there empty. But there's a woman who stands there. And I know how weird that sounds, but I've seen her. Everyone in the neighborhood has seen her. And it's always out of the corner of her eye just for like a second. The first time it happened, I was picking up the trash and I got that feeling that someone was watching me. And I whooped over. I kind of just glanced over at the lot. And there she was. And there was this girl. There was this woman standing right in the middle of the weeds, wearing something white or light colored. I'm not quite sure. Not moving at all. So I turned my head actually low. And she's just gone. Nothing there. Honestly, I figured I was going crazy. But then I had dinner with some neighbors last month. And my neighbor, David, brings it up out of nowhere. Same exact thing. The same exact thing happened to him while he was walking his dog. And then our other neighbor, Susan's like, "Oh, like that, me too." And then one of their teenage daughters says she see her like 7 times. Always the same. You can see her if you don't look right at her or right at the lot, only when you're barely looking just out of the side of your eye. Of one night I even tried just to sit on my porch for 3 hours and just staring at the empty lot to see if anything would happen, and nothing happened. I mean, honestly, she's probably out there right now, standing in the empty lot, as long as you don't actually look.
Thank you, Chuck from upstate New York. The woman in the empty lot. What is she waiting for? I think about peripheral vision. How it's actually more sensitive to movement than direct sight. How we evolved to catch threats from the corner of our eye. And this woman, she only exists in liminal space. That space between seeing and not seeing. Between there and not there. Maybe some ghosts don't want to be seen directly. Maybe they can't be. Maybe they only exist in that certain space. That moment of doubt where you think, did I just see? And before you can finish that thought, they're gone.
Hey Michelle, this is Diane calling from Sedona. I've been practicing divination for years. And I've always seen the Ouija board as just another tool for channeling energy. Nothing inherently dangerous if you know what you're doing and approach it with respect. I was doing a session for this guy, friend of a friend, who wanted to contact his deceased father. Someone I knew nothing about, had never met. We're sitting across from each other with the board between us, both of us with our fingers on the planchette. The second we started, my hands went ice cold and I couldn't stop shaking. I have no memory of the actual conversation. I just remember watching the planchette move under our fingers. But I couldn't register what it was saying. The board was upside down to me, so I was seeing everything backward. There was this rushing in my ears like white noise. I could see the guy's lips moving, asking questions, but I couldn't hear him clearly. Everything felt distant, muffled. At some point during the session, he actually lifted his finger off the planchette completely, just to test it, to make sure it wasn't him moving it, and it kept going. When we finally said goodbye and closed the session, I came back to myself. That's the only way I can describe it. Like I'd been somewhere else and suddenly I was back. My hands were still freezing. I was exhausted. And the guy was just staring at me. He said, "You just told me things that only my father and I could have known." Specific things, details about their relationship, what his father had dressed up as for Halloween when the guy was a kid, private conversations they'd had. He was a complete skeptic before that session. After, he told me he'd never touch a Ouija board again, ever. He was too shaken by how accurate it was, how specific the information was. I still use Ouija boards, I still practice divination, but I've never had a connection that strong again, and I'm not sure I want to.
Diane from Sedona, thank you for your deeply unsettling account. Some connections are too strong, even from beyond the grave.
Hi, this is Cindy Ketron with one more tale. It's called Great Grandpa Leslie Meets the Devil. Well, this was back in the early Great Depression days. The Great Depression had just started, and it was in the early 1930s. And Grandpa was one day out in his farmyard. He was playing about to eat, and Grandma said, "How are things going?" She brought him and the three farm hands some treats, some lemonade and some treats. It was July, and Grandpa said, "Have you heard anything on the radio about the Great Depression?" She said, "More people are out of work." And Grandpa was sweating. He was rubbing his face with the wet cloth she brought him. She said, "Why don't you guys take a 15-minute break?" And so they agreed, and they were enjoying their treats. And Grandpa went back to work after he finished his, and he was in the hayloft. And he said, "Boy, I'm getting sick of this." Suddenly, there was an unfamiliar voice. He said, "What if I can get you out of your dilemma?" And Grandpa said, "Who's this?" And he went right back to his work, and the voice said again, he said, "What if I made you an offer you can't refuse?" There was a normal man in a business suit, and he had a notepad with a pencil, and he was looking straight at Grandpa, and Grandpa said, "Who are you?" And he told him, he said, "I'm the devil, I have a contract for you." And Grandpa said, "Nothing." And he said, "What if I made you an offer you can't refuse?" And Grandpa said, "What if I told you I didn't want the offer?" And so the devil didn't know what to do, and he disappeared from my grandpa, and my grandpa crossed himself and said, "Thank you, Lord," and went about his way. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cindy. I love that the devil shows up with a notepad and a pencil like he's some sort of supernatural insurance salesman. And I love that your grandpa's response, instead of screaming or running or making a deal out of desperation, it was just, "No thanks." Sometimes the scariest thing you can do to something that wants power over you is refuse to be afraid of it. That's all we have this week, folks. Do you have a ghost story? Call 701-484-2222. 666. That's 701-484-2666. Or go to tellmeaghoststory.com and leave your story there. Thank you to all the callers who left messages this week. I'm your host, Michelle Newman, signing off. See you next week.